What is up, world? It's your boy Tanh, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. Today, we're going to be talking about two of the most common lease types in commercial real estate. The first one we're going to discuss is the OG of leases. So first up, it's what's called a gross lease. Now, you've probably seen this in residential real estate or with small mom and pop tenants. In a gross lease, the tenants usually just pay a fixed amount of rent every month for a specified time frame. Now that sounds pretty simple, right? It should be all fine and dandy. The most simple piece of it is that the tenant is going to be paying you X dollars every month to rent out Y space. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Utilities may or may not be included in that rent. So that's all going to depend on the agreement and the property. As the landlord, you're typically responsible for, operating expenses. You got property taxes, you have insurance, you got management, and all the operational costs that goes into the property itself. So since the tenants aren't chipping in for these expenses, you as the landlord usually will want to charge a higher base rent. So let's break it down with one example. Let's say we have a tenant named John and we have a landlord named Sarah. So John is going into an agreement to pay Sarah $900 per month on the first of every month for a total of 24 months. And let's say all utilities are included because there's only 1 meter to the entire building. Sarah is not going to be worrying about any electric bills or water bills. Everything's going to be covered. So that would mean John is not going to be worrying about an electric bill or a water bill or any other bill because everything is covered within his lease in that $900 per month. Now, let's say in another example, John pays Sarah $750 every month for 24 months, but the twist is that John will be responsible for electricity and gas because these units are separately metered, and she being Sarah, can go into an agreement to have John pay his own utilities. So let's say we left out water. Now, in this agreement, Sarah's going to cover all the water expenses, and it's probably because it's not separately metered or for whatever reason in their negotiations. And the third example, let's say John pays Sarah $600 a month for 24 months, but he's going to be responsible for all of his utilities, gas, electricity, and water. At the end of the day, it just depends on what the negotiations are, what you can do with the property that you have, and what the agreement comes out to be. Naturally, the landlord is the one that's going to be responsible for all of the operating expenses. So, if you ever craft a gross lease, make sure you factor in future operational expenses for the property and make sure that the base rent is going to keep you afloat during those times, because you never know when those costs are going to change. Which is why your rent escalations are going to be way more important here, because you really don't have any common area maintenance or CAM to take care of your operational costs if they do go up. So you're probably wondering, why the hell would I do a gross lease? Well, it's because gross leases are pretty straightforward and they're easier to understand for both landlords and tenants. It's pretty much a no-fuss option, and it works better for smaller businesses. Smaller businesses like to keep things simple. If you get things a little bit too complicated, they're not going to understand it, and they're probably going to end up leaving your space for another one or not even renting your space at all. Now, to piggyback off of gross leases, we also have what's called modified gross leases. Now, these bad boys are a twist on your classic gross leases. In a modified gross lease, the tenant will be paying a base rent just like in a gross lease, but the kicker is that they're going to chip in for a portion of the operating expenses. Now, this is utility non-dependent. That's a separate agreement between you and the tenant. So when we're looking at operating expenses, some of the most common examples come up to be, some of the repairs, security, janitorial services. So let's break it down with a couple of examples. Let's say we still have John, and we still have Sarah. John's a tenant, Sarah's a landlord. Let's say they come to an agreement to have the lease be $600 per month. So John's going to be paying Sarah $600 per month for 24 months as his base rent. On top of that, he's going to be responsible for 50% of the proportionate share of the operating expenses. And let's say in this scenario, Sarah's going to be taking care of all of the utilities. Now, in another example, let's say John's going to be paying Sarah $500 per month for that 24-month base term. Again, he'll be on the hook for 50% of his proportionate share of operating expenses, but this time he's going to be covering all of the utilities. And I went with the 50% proportionate share because we're going to assume that he's taking 50% of the building. So the utilities are pretty much an anomaly here. It really depends on the property, if it's separately metered or not, and whether or not your negotiations come out to having the tenant be responsible for those utilities or not. So at the end of the day, it's all going to be laid out on the lease, and it depends on how you negotiate and what you agree upon. So you're probably thinking now, why would you choose a modified gross lease? Well, it's just another negotiation piece. It's a middle ground option that offers a little bit more flexibility than a gross lease, but it doesn't go all in like a net lease, which we're going to discuss in a later episode. So stay tuned. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.